Hello, everyone, and welcome to Insider Gaming here with another special spotlight. This one focusing on indie games in general, as I'm joined by two of the co-founders of 6-1 Indie, Mike Towndrow and Kyle Stephenson. Guys, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to join me here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us. I was super delighted to get your DM, and it's about time. You know, we've been like just on the periphery of each other for like it feels like years. So it's about time the Bald brothers
exactly
forces.
Bald elder emo.
I'm the black sheep of this
and,
tree.
and Kyle.
Yeah.
It's never too late. You can shave your head.
You can.
No,
you can.
You can. I went a little too short when I was in middle school on a buzz cut. Never again.
I was forced to have them as a kid. It was either that or look like a 40-year-old man with like this comb over. And then when I got older, I grew my hair, and then I had kids and I lost my hair.
Yeah, 25 for me, like mid-college. I was like, nah, that's it.
Yep, that's exactly it. 25 is when they started. 25 is when I started to lose it. 27 is when I gave up hope.
Were you also very grateful for having a good shaped head when you eventually did it?
Yeah, when I shaved, I was like, all right, it's round.
Yeah,
I've seen some you know,
bad stuff.
What Roly Poly Oly's box-headed friend. I've seen those types of heads on bald people, and I feel so bad. I'm like,
yeah,
I'll donate to your hair transplant surgery. Like some people, it just doesn't work.
Kyle, we got to find out your head shape. You know?
Yeah, we got to test.
I'm
head off,
totally
headphones
fine.
right now. We'll just go completely off the rails.
Kyle, August 2024 showcase. Two bald boy summers going. Come on.
No. I will commit to maybe a bald cap for a segment, but that's about it.
I'm gonna write that down.
A bald cap. So you have 6-1 Indie dedicated to showcasing a side of gaming that people who are Insider Gamer know I love because of our indie initiative and what I've just loved for years, indie gaming. How did that all start?
Yeah, I guess I could start and Kyle, you could take over. Yeah, so I met Kyle and Kelsey ironically on the same day, and it definitely changed my life because I met my best friend and my wife on the same day, which is crazy. Obviously we had the same interest in video games and the same hobbies and so on and so forth. I think our first time getting that itch for coverage and like becoming content creators and like just covering video games in general was, and Kyle, please fact check me on the date. I think it was PAX East 2018. That's when that was our first PAX East together. And that was our first, I believe, our first just gaming event in general.
Yeah,
I think
that was the first gaming convention I ever went to. Was PAX East 2018.
Because I think, I did PSX the year prior. Rest in peace. But first PAX, and I was just completely enamored by the entire scene and especially the indies, because that's where a lot of like the indie shine is, like these PAXs. Like there's there are first parties there once in a while, at least, you know, back in the day there was more present, but it just kind of completely fell in love. And then like just with our we like to call them civilian badges, like the badges that we pay to get into PAX, doing our best to do like some sort of coverage. Like that's when we started messing around with the idea of a podcast and talking about the games that we played and whatnot. 2019 we took it a little more seriously. At that time we were under the name Kinda NYC. We come from the Kind of Funny community. We're all Kind of Funny best friends. So Kinda NYC started as just kind of like a community group for all like the New York City area people to like kind of hang out, gather together. So out of that we did the podcast, and just trying to do the coverage, realize how damn difficult it was to do it without like an actual like media access and whatnot. And thankfully
and just explaining what Kind of NYC was as well, like to try to for people who don't know, like online communities are very like their knowledge of that kind of world is slim. To try to explain that we're friends that met online, we have similar interests, and we decided to do this thing, and we're under this banner but not officially affiliated with them at all. So we were like, let's just try to find a different name, a different banner to kind of make things easier for games PR people, and just to try to not like officially say we are part of their banner, because we love them, but we don't want to ever like
step on any toes.
Exactly.
So PAX East 2020 was the last time we were under that banner. We like to joke saying it was the last video game convention ever, because that was like March 2020 when things were, the world was going to hell. Like me and Kyle will wake up every morning in the hotel room and the news would be playing of like, there's more cases in Boston. So great. Meanwhile, I am not realizing I'm currently contracting COVID and I am like actively dying on the show floor. And obviously this was like before lockdown, before vaccines, like we didn't know what the hell was going on. In my mind, I was like, it's Pax Plague, whatever. A week later, I was stuck in bed for 3 weeks and I almost died. So yeah, lockdown happens, and I got laid off from my job. Kyle, I believe you were also not working at the time.
Yeah, I was in education, a substitute teacher, and schools were locked down, so there was no need for me.
Yeah. So at the time, I was working in the film industry. I have a background in audio engineering, so I was doing a lot of audio for film, and worked for a nonprofit organization. So obviously we had a lot more time on our hands. And that's really like, it's so awkward to say, but like me and Kyle always kind of say that we're pretty grateful for lockdown, because that, like, without that time and without getting laid off, we wouldn't have been able to develop what 6-1 Indie is. So we took that summer into fall to really start developing, okay, what does content look like? That's when I like figured out that I have a knack for writing. And we launched 6-1 Indie on November 4th.
I don't know the day anymore because we changed it.
Yeah. Now we say our birthday is June 1st for 6-1.
Because it makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But yeah, we officially launched November 2020, and that's when we started doing, like, we built out a whole editorial section. We did the weekly podcast, which is the 6-1 IndieCast, live reacts to a lot of the shows like Day of the Devs, Wholesome Games, so on and so forth. And this was the real shift to just solely dedicating ourselves to indies, because we always naturally found ourselves attracted to the indie space anyways. I always say that, like, true innovation within the gaming industry lies within the indie scene. That's where all the fascinating ideas are happening. That's where all the excitement is happening. That's where you get these fresh experiences that, like, you have never played before. Take this week with Balatro, like a poker roguelike. Poker 2 just dropped. You don't see that in the AAA scene. So the biggest thing was, like, every time we see these, like, fascinating games, I always pull Teenage Blob from 2020, a game that literally saved my life during lockdown. It is such a crime that nobody talks about that game because of how incredible of an experience it is. So that's kind of the driving force behind what we do. Like, we want to make sure we do our very best to give indie games and indie developers a platform. Like, doesn't matter the shape or size, doesn't matter what you're trying to do, who you're trying to target, like what game you're trying to craft. Like, we want to help. Obviously, we are a small DIY indie crew ourselves. We can't cover every single game. We do our damnedest to do it, but yeah, that's kind of the origin story.
and like you talked about, like, yeah, there's games that people just maybe under the radar because games come out every single day. It is impossible to keep track of things. Like, there's games where I'll find out, oh, when did this come out? 5 years ago. Okay, well, yeah, I'm just finding out about it now. Even like, and you get so many, even on my end, like the releases, and like, check this out. It is impossible to read and check every single thing that comes out, and it's upsetting. It can be demoralizing, but yeah, something like this, in my mind, is, like you said, something that's needed. With that, what is the kind of reaction once things really started to pick up and move forward with what you guys are doing? Like, obviously the developers themselves are like, this is great, a chance to hopefully get more eyes on our game. But aside from individual developers, how's that response to what you guys have been building going?
We got a decent amount of good feedback from the very first, like, showcase that we did, which is what, 2022
April 22.
Which, looking at that compared to our last one in August, it's wild just how far we've grown and just identity and just how much of a smoother production it is. But hearing from, like you said, just the developers who love that we are using our whatever small platform we have to uplift these small indie devs and the games that they create. But even our peers and friends of ours are like, you guys are really doing something that is different and needed. And because we've been video games fans for all our lives. We watch the big E3 showcases, and it seems whenever an indie shows up, it's either in a montage or it gets maybe 30 seconds or whatnot, and it might look cool, but then we don't hear from it because everything overshadows it. So any
no one's
moment,
talking about it when
exactly
the showcase is over. Yeah.
So any moment that we could capture for 30-40 minutes twice a year now, just to like really all eyes on indies, we're gonna take it, and seemingly everyone's okay and happy with it. So
so far so good.
Yeah.
And obviously, like, we're not the only people that do indie showcases. Like, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing without people like The Mix and Wholesome Games and Glitch and Day of the Devs. Like, they directly inspire what we do. And even with like so many indie shows out there, or like those being the primary indie shows, there are still so many others, like so many games that still like don't get that shot. So we're like, screw it. We know how to do these shows. Like, we know what is special in the space and deserves the attention. So yeah, that was like the real inspiration behind the first showcase. And I do want to shout out our editor-in-chief, Harry, who proposed that we do the first showcase as a PAX East panel. And we're like, okay, we're gonna try to do a in-person showcase at PAX. The panel got denied, and in hindsight, thank God it got denied, because I could not imagine doing that in person for the first time.
Stammering, and I mean, I stammer doing pre-recorded scripts, so I'm like redoing. I couldn't imagine like, here's what game is next, and then you feel like unprepared, even though you've done this 100 times, you've rehearsed, then you're going, I don't know, and then you freeze.
Yeah, that first showcase, man. You should hear or see some of the behind the scenes footage. It took.
What if we told you, Mike, that first showcase we didn't even write a script? Everything was like off the top of the head.
I'd 100% believe it, because I did one at an old outlet. We wanted to do a sports one.
Yeah,
and we did it. I did it 100% on my own. Reached out to developers. We had like 7 games. Everybody was seemingly on board. We were able to get 1 or 2 like big games, because I thought like without at least one big title, no one's gonna care.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked out. But looking back, I'm like, man, I should have like had a prompter.
Yeah.
I should have set my monitor up.
Prompter.
I should have set my monitor up as a teleprompter and use that, rather than just like, I have index cards on the floor that I'm gonna look at in between takes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. We I think like the night before we decided to shoot, so we shot at my old job, because I got rehired right after lockdown. So we shot at my old job in the soundstage using this camera. And like, I think in the kitchen the morning of, we're like, okay, we could write up like a quick little thing. And then just like under our thighs had pieces of paper that we're pulling out in between takes. But like, that show, it was a half hour total. I think it took us like 2 hours to actually record it, because we just kept messing up. But yeah, I'm like, it's wild to think like, going from that in April 22, getting such a strong reaction just from like what was very much a DIY operation, still is a very DIY operation. That first show, we had 18 games. We showed off 18 games because we got 18 games.
Yeah.
The next showcase in March 23, when we opened up submissions, the submissions closed at around 600 submissions. So we went from 18 to 600. So in our minds, we're like, clearly we struck the right chord, and we're doing it right. And then going from March to August, we had another 700. And then for this showcase in March 2024, on the 20th, on youtube.com/61indie, we had over 1,000 games submitted.
Yeah.
How do you decide? And because you can't do all of them.
Great question, Mike.
Oh my God.
I mean, I couldn't imagine like that many games. I mean, it's a great problem to have.
It is.
Agreed.
But you also run into that issue where it's like, you're going to disappoint somebody.
Of course. And
it's just like, well, why are they picked and not me? And blah, blah, blah. And then trying to explain it to these people, like, sorry, you weren't selected for XYZ, but how are you guys going to, how do you figure it out? Because your next one's coming up in March.
Yeah. So I think like it's a good kind of preface to that is a big thing we try to strive to do, and we continue to do moving forward, like no matter what. Our showcase is a zero barrier showcase. No gatekeeping. We do not charge the devs anything, depending on like whether it's submission fees or just being a part of the show. Like, we do not offer commercial slots because we just think that's not, they're indies. They're like, that little bit of budget goes a long way when it comes to like maybe some influencer marketing or
just
something into dev budget.
Building the game. Yeah,
exactly. So like, even with, and we'll get to the news about Vicarious, even with this new partnership, like we are very much still ourselves. Like, we are committed to never charging the devs a cent. Like, obviously, like down the line, we want to like get some sort of revenue from the showcases, it ain't gonna come from the devs. We're gonna figure that out down the line. But yeah, go into the actual submission process, and Kyle, feel free to chime in. So taking this cycle, we like to kind of refer to things as like showcase cycles. So like for the March 24 showcase cycle, we opened up submissions in December, Kyle?
Yep.
After Game Awards, yeah.
Yeah, it was about a few weeks, 2-3 weeks worth of submissions, I think.
Yeah, so we did December. I think we opened on my birthday, December 14th to first week of January.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, to right before Christmas.
What's time?
Whatever. What is time? Who's to say? Anyways,
construct. It's an illusion.
It was open for a few weeks. Throughout that period, we would just obsessively check the submission form every day, and we'd increasingly see like, oh, 100. Oh, another 100. Oh, another 200. Sick. We do our best to like, usually it's myself and Kyle and a couple other folks from the 601 Indie team. We just come together at night and just start one by one going through each and every submission. We'll look at the Steam page, we'll look at trailers, we'll look at the game details, we'll look at their target release date, we'll look at where they've been showcased before, if they've been showcased before, if they are willing to offer any exclusives. So it's a lot of nitty gritty for each individual game, hence why we try to do it as submissions are rolling in, because no way in hell we would have been able to get it done in time if we were waiting for, like, we're back from the holidays and all of a sudden we're going through 1,200 submissions. And yeah, like it kind of there's no like real rule of thumb of what we're looking for. Like you mentioned, like it's always the worst part of this is delivering the news of like, hey, you haven't been selected. Rarely it's ever because of the game itself. It's purely because of the bandwidth. We try to produce a well-paced show that is not going to waste the viewer's time, and a show that not one game is going to overshadow the other. Because like a lot of these longer shows like take, I don't know, like I think some of the EA shows back in the day used to be like hours and hours long. You kind of forget about what game opened the show by the time you get towards the tail end of the show.
Yeah.
We always want to avoid that. We always want to make sure each game is memorable. Despite the game maybe being like something that is like super intriguing and super exciting that we want to play, it may not be the best showcase kind of game, and that could be, I don't know, it just like maybe doesn't elicit that kind of excitement from a trailer perspective. Like, and again, nothing against the game, but we don't want to portray a game in the wrong light. Like,
I don't think the best showing possible for the game.
Yeah, and like just using, I don't even want to throw out an example, but like, let's say it is game X. We don't think it's a showcase worthy kind of show, despite it being like interesting in its gameplay and its mechanics. If lined up next to something that like has a banger trailer, everybody's gonna pay attention to the banger trailer and kind of forget about the other game. So like
100%.
There is that kind of judgment call of like, okay, this game is really sick, but are we going to be doing it any justice by including it in the show?
For example, I mean, you can think of some games, in my head, there's games that involve like you're a hacker and everything looks like a code. That's not going to, in my mind, and this is just me thinking, if I'm watching, even as me with a development background, like a software developer, those types of games I find so much fun. Someone watching probably isn't.
Yeah.
It's just, okay, it's what you would think of when you see hacking on a movie where it's a black screen, green text in a terminal. Like, that's not going to be enjoyable for a trailer.
And I think our mindsets come from just, like I said earlier, just being fans and watching showcases. Like we know what not to do because we've seen it. Like my favorite thing is, like, just because it's a AAA game, it's coming out next week, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. When the remake was announced, there was a trailer after that, but nobody remembers what that trailer was because the hype of remake was so high. And then they followed that up with, I think, the Shenmue 3 Kickstarter announcement. So like that game that was in the middle, sorry, but that kind of like lost the time. So we don't want that to ever happen to any of our games, or we try not to let that happen. Of course, we can't predict how people are going to receive the trailers. But
they could just, I mean, if you put a game, you're thinking, oh, it's not going to be great. People will like it, but you don't expect it to take off.
Yeah.
And it involves maybe a crab with nunchucks. And people are going to be like, crab with nunchucks, greatest thing ever. Screw everything. You're like, you just don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah, and like that kind of goes hand in hand with the part I hate the most is like the denial email. Every time I send one of those emails, I do offer like, hey, please stay in touch. We want to collaborate with as many folks as possible, whether it is an interview, send us a key for the game, we'll play it on stream, we'll talk about it on the podcast. Like we still want to do our best to signal boost as many of the games as we possibly can. Because obviously going down from like 1,000 plus to around, I'll give you an exclusive, Mike, 1,000 plus to 39 games for March. That's a daunting task.
That's a
so
full-time job just going through that.
There's a lot of tough calls. I mean, so like the process goes like, yeah, we just individually go game by game, and then whatever kind of like, you know, it sticks out to us, we'll mark it on a spreadsheet as green, and then once we go through all those submissions, we take all of our greens to a new spreadsheet. We see how many greens are left over and start whittling down. We always want to know. We always know we want to aim for that 30 number because we know math wise that's around 45 minutes. We never want to go over an hour. Like we don't want to overstay our welcome. So yeah, going from like 100 plus games that we really like down to 30 is another like tumultuous like process.
It's super difficult when we have a game that we really love, but we already have too much of a genre already portrayed in the showcase.
Yeah.
So like we don't want to have it be too horror heavy or too action heavy, too cutesy or cozy heavy. So that's having the balance to make sure that there is something for everybody. It's also kind of challenging because
you have to do the cliche of that everybody mocks when it comes to like video gamer. There's a little something for everyone. Like you have to.
It is. Yeah, you have to.
We want it to be well-rounded. We don't want to just hit one note.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we're all like the big genre we always kind of like naturally lean towards is horror. I'm a big horror person. I know like Kyle to some extent also, and
I'm getting into it.
You're getting into it.
I'm scared of
and, Matt, Matt, who helps out with the submission process as well and the selection process. Big horror hounds. We love just gnarly, crunchy, weird as heck horror. So naturally, the showcase is a lot of those horror games get greened, and it's so hard to whittle them away. But yeah, like we're not gonna have a showcase that with like 10 of these horror games. 3 is okay. I'll do 3.
Yeah.
There will always, like I guarantee you, until the end of time, there's always gonna be at least 3 horror games in these shows. But yeah, you really do have to kind of like cater it to everyone. Because it's not, hey, here are the games that Mike and Kyle like. It's here's the games that we think everyone should be keeping on their radars, that they should wish list, that they should play.
And also, also into addition to that, a lot of people I think forget that itch.io also exists as well, and there's a lot of great indie game representation on there. So
I mean, for people like you bring up itch.io, sorry to cut you off, but that's where a lot of people put their games first. That is how you get those demos out there for indie devs,
exactly,
especially the solo ones.
Look at real quick to interrupt, like look at Buckshot Roulette. That made a lot of waves at the end of 2023, and they just announced that they're coming to Steam. They got a publisher with Critical Reflex. That wouldn't have happened if they picked up a little bit of traction on itch. So yeah, a lot of people do forget about it. And Kyle, I'll swing it back to you. Why we were talking about that.
When we get submissions and we see, oh, this game is only on itch, that kind of like we want to show that off, because a lot of really small, really great indie games don't ever get played or don't ever get covered because they're on that platform that a lot of people forget about and only think of Steam.
Or even they don't even forget about it. It can be overwhelming. Like admittedly,
absolutely,
it's overwhelming.
Absolutely, yeah. So if something that looks cool and it's on itch, we definitely want to. I don't want to say prioritize, but that definitely is like another feather in the cap for like us, for the submission process.
So the showcase, we're going to wrap up the showcase and move on to the other big story that dropped before we recorded this. The showcase is March 20th as like an unofficial kickoff to PAX East. How compared, looking back, you talked about the differences between the first one and where you're going to now. What does it mean to you guys to see this showcase and the growth, to have those submissions be what they are, and to see people, no, we want this, like this is something we need?
It's weird.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
it's weird.
Funny enough, I was just talking about this with friend of the show and fellow indie council member Janet Garcia. We're talking about it last night during the podcast. Like, it's so surreal and weird whenever like we get recognized at a PAX from a complete stranger, and they say like, "Hey, watch the showcase. It was great. Game A, B, and C are killer. It's on my wish list. Play the demo. Blah blah blah." It's even stranger when somebody from like Devolver, Annapurna, or a developer we look up to commend the showcase and like say that they watched it. Even at PAX West this past year, bumped shoulders with Jeff Grubb, and Grubb was like, "Hey, watch the showcase. It was great." I'm like, dude, are you like that? These are people I like look up to, and it's so weird to be a part of the conversation. So yeah, it's strange. It's humbling. I'm immensely thankful for it. Obviously, I don't want to speak for Kyle also, but
yeah, no, to echo Mike, I feel the same way. It's weird to our goal of making a mark in this industry and carving out something for us to kind of like do what we want to do is actually kind of working, and to be recognized for that, or just to have people just generally just like what we've been doing is very humbling, but also very scary because we got to keep it up. And that's always that thought of like,
you set that bar too high. You
exactly.
set the bar high, and people
I hope we don't ever, lose it, and keep delivering what we have the bar at, and keep moving it however high up that it goes.
Yeah, it's I think after every time we watch the final cut of the showcase, it's like, or look at the lineup, it's like, damn, how the hell are we gonna up this next year, or like keep up with ourselves? And like, it was very easy to up ourselves after the first one. It was very DIY. Made a massive leap in 2023 with both March and August. And yeah, after like now being our third more like professionally produced one, still like we very much do these on our own. Like the film crew are friends of mine, and thankfully for the first two last year, or the second and third last year, they just did it for lunch, which is great. Thankfully, with like a lot of this news that is dropping this week, where I'm actually able to pay them something substantial, which is lovely. But yeah, looking at some of the footage from, because we just filmed a couple weeks ago, looking at some of the footage and just some of the scripting and how we open the show in particular this time around, I'm very nervous for August because I don't know what the hell we're going to do for August.
See, I made that mistake in high school. Completely different circumstances, but I got on the honor roll in high school, and my parents were like, "Oh, we expect this." Shouldn't. And they never got it again.
Why should just drop out?
When in doubt, see out.
Also, I'm really happy that everyone seems to dig our dumb mascot Petey. He's kind of the unsung hero, but I just love like out of the very first show that we did, just have a skeleton with the pigeon mask on, and just have him be like the thing. It was like, oh, it's great.
Everybody needs a dumb mascot. I mean, I view myself as the dumb mascot here. So I'm a beautiful face.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah.
Absolutely.
My boss is gonna hear that, see that, and go and message me and go, no.
Listen, goddamn, for the people that dig the pigeon joke, we go all in this time around.
You're not ready.
Nobody's ready.
Every time I hear pigeon, there's these kids books called Pig and Elephant, or Elephant and Piggy, and there's a pigeon that's always in the art. I can't remember the author. I should, because we have almost every book in this house.
I think it's Mo Willems. Is that who?
Yeah. And we have the pig. There's the pigeon that's always hidden. Yeah, right. There's the pigeon that's in the end of every book, and my kid, my 3-year-old, always has to spot the pigeon.
Yeah.
And the pigeon's everywhere. Now we have pigeon needs a bath. Pigeon needs a puppy. Pigeon wants this. That's terrifying.
What's a joke in 2020?
What's really funny is because Mike, now that he moved and he's no longer New York based, when he was coming to when he was coming to the showcase filming a few weeks ago, he had to transport a skeleton like on the subway, public transport, in the middle of January, and I just love
it was my favorite day of the year. Just getting stares at on the L train.
Yeah, you have the mask. You have the mask on it. You're just sitting it there and sitting on your lap. You just arm around it.
And listen,
maybe pull out a bottle, feed it like it's your kid. I don't know.
Love my fellow New Yorkers. They are not shy. They'll come up to you. They'll ask you what the skeleton's about.
Yep.
And you gotta come up with some excuse. The last note about the showcase, I want to make sure I shout these people out. The most humbling thing is after the showcase airs and I start talking to some of the developers, and we get messages from the developers of saying like, "Oh my god, I got a spike in wish list this person covered the game, these many people are playing the demo, so on and so forth. That is what we're doing it for. That is what makes it all worth it. Like, it's a difficult task. Like, it's a very daunting project that we decide to burden ourselves with year on year. But getting those messages, like, as we're settling into our Boston or Seattle hotel rooms to start tackling packs, is just the goddamn best. Like, I cannot describe that feeling of just pure accomplishment. Yeah, it's like sincerely like unbeatable.
I heard a loud noise of a child falling upstairs. They're wrestling like 2 kids. It's great. I love it. So let's move on from the showcase itself to the other big news. The Indie Game Awards were announced, a partnership between 6-1 Indie and Vicarious PR. This is something that, especially after the last few game awards and stuff, myself and just the indie community, we kind of noticed they just indie games just get passed. Granted, the big numbers are in the AAA games, like the first party. We know that. We know exactly how it is, and we understand we understand it as indie fans. But it's still one of those things of like something to be recognized. Not just here the games coming out, but what games really deserved it. And you guys announced these awards. What went into deciding now was the time to put something like this together, and the plans for it and things like that?
So this is something we've always wanted to do. Like, we knew, like, just like all, like most outlets and people who review video games and cover video games, they have outlet specific awards like the IGN Game of the Year awards and so on and so forth. We tried our hand in that, and we always wanted to do something different around that. But like, the real dream was like, no, we want to do a proper award show. This was in the back of our mind for years. I think the reason we finally decided to pull the trigger on it was after proving ourselves with last March showcase and last August showcase. We knew that on like a non-existent budget and just the experience that we have, we know how to do a larger scale, professionally produced showcase and just production in general. I think like we initially tweeted it out back in like 22, I think, like, because there were the complaints about the major awards back then as well. Just kind of put feelers out there, and like the response was like so overwhelming. But we knew we wanted to focus on doubling down on the showcases first, and we wanted to make sure we were able to like get that process locked down. Like, we know like within these 3 months we can knock out the showcase. It's gonna be great. So we knew this year it was finally time to actually do it. It was just a matter of how to do it. And that's where Vicarious comes in. Both Kyle and myself are employees of Vicarious as well. I'm the account executive over there doing PR with a bunch of clients. Kyle, an account coordinator, helping out with a bunch of clients as well. We were talking to them starting in July, Kyle, June.
Yeah, it was like last year at some point of just kind of like joining forces and making sure that we can continue making production wise the best production that we possibly can.
Yeah, just like without any conflicts of interest, and like we just make sure like nobody's stepping on each other's toes.
And also selfishly, like, we, before this partnership, working super late into the night on the weekdays on this stuff after working a full-time job, it's a lot. It's taxing. It's stressful. The burnout is a real thing that happens. And so having the opportunity to now be officially under the banner where we can dedicate some actual work time hours on it is super beneficial, especially for Mike, because Mike won't tell you. He works so damn hard, and he deserves a break here and then. So
we'll be at the showcase this weekend. So we were talking to Vicarious about like a potential collaboration partnership, what that looks like, ironing out all the details. And I will say, like, this is something we never really would have considered with anybody else, but it became abundantly clear super quickly that Vicarious shares our same vision and our same passion for the indie scene. Like, Vicarious themselves, it's like they are not some giant corporation in an office building with like suits and ties. I'm pretty sure technically the 6-1 indie team is larger than the Vicarious team. Like, they are also, despite how much like incredible things that they do in supporting the scene and doing marketing and ads and so on and so forth, they are a very tight-knit, small, scrappy crew like us. So as more conversations were happening, it just made sense. So yeah, in December, we finally crossed the T's and dotted the I's, and I think it was after the Game Awards aired. I shot Kyle a text like as soon as the award show, the Game Awards ended. I was like, listen, this is the year. This is gonna be our winter show or our big winter production. And Kyle was like, okay, let's do it. And then I messaged the CEO over at Vicarious, Michael, another, it's not confusing at all.
No, greatest name of all time.
It is, it's true.
Kyle's out here feeling left out. I mean, sorry.
The amount of monster Kyle memes I've lived through.
Yeah,
it's fine.
We're just Mike. Though I've never been called Mike in my life. No one calls me Mike.
So yeah, I shot Michael a message like right after Kyle. I was like, hey, so I think like we really want to go for it finally, like in 2024. He was like, cool, let's do it. And that's just kind of how it happened. And pretty much straight away, once we like got the confirmation internally that we were going to do it, I already started reaching out to some notable folks in the indie space about potentially being involved in presenting, judging, sponsorship, whatever it may be. So we already have some folks locked in, which is super exciting. If you follow our work, you could probably guess who some of those names are. It's not really a secret.
Yeah.
We're not going to officially announce anything yet, but yeah. And we're also having conversations with some other folks in the indie space that like we pretty much we knew like we weren't the only people having this conversation, and like we shouldn't be the only one having this conversation. Yeah. Like for example, the Debug Awards happen every year in the UK, the Debug Indie Awards.
Yeah.
So like we are not trying to be like the only people that do it. Similar to the showcases. Like like there are so many indie games. A bunch of indie games deserve recognition. Is there going to be some crossover? Of course, but we ain't trying to pigeonhole like saying like no, this we are the only ones that are allowed to do these awards. But just between the response of the showcases and just like our knowledge of the indie space and just kind of like not to our own horn, but like the authenticity behind what we do, I think we are able to produce something that is truly authentic, truly special, and just frankly just done right. Like we know we need to do this right, and we know what it takes to do it right. So I think we already kind of started talking about like with some of our community members, like this is not going to be a showcase. There are not going to be any games announced during this thing. This is going to be strictly awards with people saying their piece about their games that they put a fraction of their lives into. Like they deserve a spotlight to say their piece and really like bask in the moment. So yeah, that's kind of the driving force behind all of it.
And you said this is going to be like a winter one, end of year wrap up. And you brought it being a presentation. Is this something you guys want to do like a live show at like a theater? I don't know what you can say. Obviously, it's so soon. But is this something, that's going to be in person that people can attend? That it's just going to be like in person live, but only industry members are going to be there? How are you hoping to have this go?
Great question, Mike.
Yeah. I could say, and Kyle, please feel free to scream at me if I'm talking too much. I could say that there are conversations happening. So obviously I would say the dream is a live show with developers in attendance.
You'll dress fancy, get on the stage, celebrate.
Everyone wants to dress fancy. Exactly. Like that's really the driving force behind it.
I need more reasons to. I'm hoping this year's the year I start doing it.
Hell yeah. That's the goal. I think it's very much going to be similar to our first showcase. I think this first award show, like whether it is all digital or a physical event, is going to be kind of not the test bed, but like the start laying the blueprint down of like, okay, here's how we think this show is going to go. We do the show, we reflect back in whenever we end up doing it. Let's say hypothetically, we reflect in January once it's all said and done. Okay, what went right, what went wrong, what do we need to change and adapt next year? That's exactly how we did the showcases as well. And that's how we had that massive jump from April 2022 to March 2023. So the dream in however many years, it does become a standard annual show at one set location that is super accessible and easy for people to get to and cheap to get to. And just like people are just there already. But yeah, for this first one, a lot of conversations are happening behind the scenes. We haven't decided on fully digital versus physical yet. Even if it is digital, like we're having the conversation of, is it going to be a pre-recorded thing? Are we going to do a live thing? So yeah, conversations are happening.
It's daunting.
Exciting conversations.
Exactly. Like, it's a good problem. We talked about it with the amount of submissions with the showcase. It's a good problem to have because if there's no conversations happening, there's clearly no interest, and it seems like there's an interest.
Yeah.
How has the response of the community been to the awards announcement,
Kyle?
I think it's been pretty stellar, and I think just from the indie game community as a whole, I think they just are excited for more indie game awards. Like Mike mentioned, like we know we're not the only indie game awards, and we will never pitch it as we are the only like game in town. But it's just another chance to celebrate the types of games we love and the creators that make them. And it seems like our community and gaming community as a whole are really, really into that idea. So I hope they're continue to be excited as we iron out all these details, and when we get there, they tune in and hopefully see their favorite indie game win something. Like
I think a big thing from the people who are familiar with our work, they know, if I could get my inner New Yorker out of me a little bit, they know how hard we goddamn go with these showcases. So I think the prospect of us doing an indie game award show and like knowing that we're going to pull all the strings pull out all the stops and just like really put our everything into it. And they know how outspoken we've been about our criticism when it comes to other events and whatnot. I think it's just like that trust and expectation that we already set for ourselves. It's just really endearing seeing the reaction. And yeah, like Kyle said, it's been stellar.
How are you feeling? Like you talked about like the openness for the criticism and stuff like that. That also obviously puts pressure on you guys to deliver something great.
Yeah.
What's that added pressure? Granted, you're not close to the event happening, but obviously the end of the year is going to come around quicker than anybody thinks.
Yeah.
So on top of the showcases, now you have this third event for the winner to think about. That added pressure, what does that do for you guys moving forward?
I'm glad you bring up pressure, not like there's enough right now on
I got it
leading into March.
I got to. I'm dealing with it 1,000 pounds of it right now.
I mean,
mine happens to be in the form of another child. This one is
these are our childs also.
Yeah, that's how diamonds are made under pressure. So I mean, personally, I welcome it, but I know it's it definitely can be a lot sometimes when you feel like time gets away from you. But I welcome it because you only make better things when you have the pressure on you.
Yeah, kind of just backing that up. Yeah, I definitely welcome it. Each of these showcase cycles, it is the most stressful, high pressure few months of, well, personally my life, and I'm sure Kyle's the same way. Like, grinding away, getting these edits done, make sure the website is all good, making sure we get all the interviews recorded, all the art is done, and so on and so forth, like a million things. But at the same time, as stressful as that is, I adore it. I love the grind. I love staying up until 3 a.m. editing the goddamn showcases. So I am already like, I don't want to rush it. Like there's still a lot of like pre-production planning to do and a lot of things to solidify. And I'm grateful that we already solidified a bunch of stuff, like even before we announced things. But not to rush it, but I can't wait to actually like get into the thick of it and start putting our vision that we've been dreaming. Like this is a dream project, and just like I'm so excited after so many years to finally put our mark on the award scene.
The pressure really hit when we saw the logo. For at least me personally, saw the logo, saw how awesome it was real. From Mike Clancy, who does all our graphics on our team, and it just kind of set in like, okay, we're doing it, and we have to not only live up to the image in our head, but that logo, because I think that logo looks fancy as all hell.
So obviously, and this just comes as to make sure questions are in full circle. The partnership, it's with Vicarious PR.
Yeah,
they are the PR. They have their own indie games under their belt. Is there that worry that some people might question the legitimacy of it, depending on how things go?
Of course. Yeah, even when I first started with Vicarious back in, I don't know, a couple years ago at this point, and then Kyle hopped on last year. Um, from day like originally I was supposed to be stepping down from 6-1. That lasted a week because I missed it too much. Thankfully Vicarious has been always like super supportive of, like, at the time was the side hustle. But yeah, since day one, we've always been super clear of like, hey, just heads up, this is a Vicarious game. Like, we do our best to just not talk about Vicarious games, but if we do cover a game that is like pretty unavoidable or like on the Vicarious side, for example, like Rogue Legacy 2 was a Vicarious client for the launch. So it was kind of like we had to kind of talk about Rogue Legacy because Rogue Legacy rules, but we're make sure we're crystal clear of like, hey, this is a Vicarious client. Take what we say with a grain of salt. Or even at that time when like I was only working there and Kyle was still only on the 6-1 side of things, I would just stay silent. But yeah, no, we would definitely. I even currently with the showcases, there's no favoritism. I think this next showcase there is one Vicarious represented game. But that's just because the game like genuinely is a game that we're fans of. Like at the end of the day, it is up to our discretion when it comes to the showcases. When it comes to the awards, that's the important part about like the judges and the people we're talking to. The people we're talking to who are already locked in for the judging process have nothing to do with Vicarious, and they are complete third parties unrelated to 6-1 and Vicarious in general. That's a big thing that went into the conversation is like, yes, these are the Indie Game Awards presented by 6-1 Indie. We're doing the production. We have like the creative like vision and so on and so forth. But we don't want this to be the 6-1 Indie Awards. Like this is not another outlet awards. This is not something that 6-1 Indie thinks is game of the year. We want some of the most profound and in the scene indie personalities, creators, media, writers, so on and so forth, to be involved in this process. We want to make sure it's a diverse cast of judges, different backgrounds, different voices. So yeah, like definitely there is that there always will be that note in the back of our minds of like, okay, for example, like Star Racer, one of my current clients, like Star Racer genuinely rules. But it's always gonna be in the back of my mind of like, okay, if we end up doing a racing category, I want to make sure that I don't have a say in that category, for example. Like I want to make sure that I'm fully hands off and like I'm leaving it to the hands of our third party friends.
So as we wind this down, is there anything about either the showcase or the awards that we haven't touched on over these 45 minutes that you feel needs to be said, needs to be addressed?
I think when it comes to the new partnership with Vicarious internally, we just keep referring, or we keep saying like we're still going to be our dumb old selves, still making the content that we do. Nothing changes at all. We want to celebrate indie games and the people who make them. That's our first and only mission, and that will be the goal going forward continually. And we're very open about things behind the scenes and whatnot. So if people feel iffy about it, I mean, we're communicating with you. It's fine.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is like there is so much time, energy, and thought that went into behind the scenes into the thought and idea of a partnership and linking up and becoming like having the two families join. It's not something that was taken lightly, and the only reason we did it is because we knew personalities and visions and passion aligned. And as Kyle said, we're still our dumb selves, and it's obvious on a day-to-day basis with the content, but it'll be very obvious when it comes to the March showcase with some of the stuff that comes out of my mouth. There Vicarious, through that we still have full creative control. Like we still have full say in everything 6-1 Indie. Vicarious thankfully is just like happy to be joining for the ride, and thankfully like they love what we do already. And just the showcases and the awards are just going to be elevated even further just with the amount of resources we have on deck now. And I'm so grateful and so excited for people to see this next one and follow along with the ride. So yeah, March 20th is the next showcase on youtube.com/61indie or just 61indie.com. And then the next showcase after that, we already announced because it's no secret, we do ahead of PAX, August 29th, 2024.
Where can people find anything they need to find out about 6-1 Indie, the showcase, and the awards?
My address is not no.
Please show up. Yeah.
61indie everywhere. 61indie.com, at 61indie on socials, Twitter, all that good stuff. Yeah, we do. We still very much have a Patreon, also patreon.com/61indie. Any of the funding we get in there just helps like some of the additional costs that go into the productions, because guess what, showcases ain't cheap. So yeah, we have some producer tiers up there for folks who want just some behind the scenes stuff, early looks at some of the tricks and bits that go into the games, or not into the games, to the actual showcase itself, and you get your name in the credits at the end of the showcase. And I will say also, along with the showcase itself, we have a bunch of developer interviews lined up. We have a massive post show that we do each time around, where half of the post show is me and Kyle talking about a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And goddamn, I'm very excited to talk about the behind the scenes stuff, because thank God I don't have hair anymore. I'll just say that.
Right.
It's been a rough cycle. And then we actually like talk about each game individually, one by one, just our hands-on impressions, all that good stuff. And our editorial team, primarily Harry, Becca, and Austin, have been killing it on the previews. So we have a bunch of written previews ready to lined up to go live on showcase day as well.
Guys, Mike, Kyle, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to lock this down, and it's different from what we usually do here at Insider Gaming, but it's something I feel is necessary as someone who loves the industry and loves indie games and loves just gaming as a whole. Getting more things like this out there to any sort of audience, any of our viewers and our readers, is something that I will continue to do, and I'm looking forward to talking again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a pleasure seeing your DM the other day. I'm so stoked we finally got to be able to do this. And yeah, no, thank you so much for being a supporter and believing in what we do, and just like having that drive for the indie scene as well. Like, we need more folks like you to back us up. We can't do this alone.
Said no one ever.